Hey everybody, I'm Jesse Weber and welcome back to Law and Crime Now. This is where we take your questions about some of the biggest cases that we've been covering. And we have with us Kathie Russon, executive trial producer, who's going to be fielding those questions. Today, our focus is on the Robert Durst case. Now, again, this is that real estate heir who is on trial and will be back on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, back in 2000. Her body was discovered in her home, shot in the head, execution style. The alleged motive here is that Durst killed her because he thought that she was going to go to the police with information about his role in the disappearance of his first wife, Kathleen, who's been missing since 1982. Now, I should tell you that this trial has been delayed. We saw it open with openings last month, the last thing over the course of several days. We saw some witnesses, and the trial, of course, is delayed because of COVID-19. They expect it to start up again on May 26th, but given everything that's happening, we'll see. We have a great guest with us today. Investigative journalist Pat LaLama is with us. And I'll tell you why this is great, because Pat was in that courtroom for this trial. And so, Pat, it's great to have you here. And I want to just start off. You got to give us an inside view. What was it like to be in that courtroom? Because we didn't have cameras there for a large portion of it. What was his behavior like, meaning Durst? Just what was it like to be there?
For me personally, loving to cover trials, I was just so grateful that I got an opportunity to have that assigned seat. I think the thing that really fascinated me the most is that you have to look at the media angle of this case. Robert Durst has been everywhere for how many years now? Obviously, with the Jinx, he became part and parcel of what we see on television, what we see in film. To see him in real life, I couldn't take my eyes off of him, and I stared at his frail little frame, sometimes in a wheelchair, sometimes not. He would shuffle into the courtroom like he was 109, and he's been very ill, as we know, but yet he seems like he's really paying attention, Jesse, and I look at him and I wonder, what is going through his head? And now that we know he's actually going to testify, oh my gosh, can you imagine? I mean, this is Shakespeare today. This is better than Shakespeare, watching this whole thing unfold inside my second home, the Los Angeles Superior Court.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to hear that we're where we're at and what we can expect. And just to go back to this case, there's so many different angles to talk upon. I want to focus right now on the infamous cadaver note, that this handwritten letter was delivered to the police department before Susan Berman's body was found. And I'm going to play you right now a moment between the prosecution and the defense. First, you can hear the prosecution, how they characterize the cadaver note in their opening statement. And then you're going to hear the defense's response. The main question is, did Robert Durst write this letter to police? Take a look.
This letter, which has commonly been referred to as the Cadaver Note, was mailed to the Beverly Hills Police Department prior to Susan's body being found. So meaning that there will be a postmark from the 23rd, and her body is not going to be found until the 24th. So inside the envelope was this cryptic note. And all it says is 1527 Benedict Canyon, and it has the word cadaver. The cadaver is a very interesting term. It's not a term that you're going to find and that you've probably seen in your own lives that a lot of people use generally. There are people that use it. The evidence is going to show that when someone goes to medical school, they are literally given a cadaver. That happens generally in your first year of medical school. And that is what you work on. That's how you learn anatomy. And the evidence will show that Bob Durst's wife, Kathie, had been in medical school while she was married to Bob Durst. That is why that word was used.
When Bob showed up and found her dead, he panicked. He wrote the anonymous letter so her body would be found, and he ran. He's run away all his life. We'll talk about that.
Okay, what's interesting about that is that you hear the defense concede their client wrote this letter. Now, why is that interesting? Because we know that Durst in the past has said, well, whoever wrote this letter had to be involved in the murder. That's a big problem right there. And we're going to get into that in a minute, but I do want to get to your questions. So, Kathie, over to you. I know we have a bunch of viewer questions for Pat. Let's get it going.
Well, first of all, Pat already touched on this. Why would Durst take the stand after his words got him in so much trouble already? I want to make a little comment. I know this is what I do, but I'm obsessed with this case as well. I was there during openings when he said he was going to testify. And afterwards, during a break, a reporter asked the defense team, now, is he really going to testify? And he got a cryptic answer back. So now I'm wondering if it's going to be some kind of a wordplay where you will hear from Robert Durst, but it's going to be something else they show us. I don't know. What do you think, Pat?
That's very interesting on your part, my dear. I asked a member of the defense team myself, when you say testify, do you mean he is going to testify in this trial, in this case? And the answer was yes. But Kathie, it never occurred to me that, knowing this defense team, which is like the Fort Knox of defense attorneys, they're all really, really strategically brilliant players, and I use that term because they're like in a chess game. They could be fooling with us. They could be, but I think we're going to hear from them. I think they've got nothing else to lose.
So, Pat, just to jump off of him testifying and going to the cadaver note, they're saying he wrote it, but he said in the jinx, and I believe it was the jinx, that whoever wrote this note had to be involved in the killing. How are they going to work around that? What have you learned about this? What have you learned maybe Durst will say on the stand to work his way around this cadaver note?
Well, you have to remember that Durst did exactly what his attorney didn't want him to do, which was to do the jinx. Any good defense attorney does not want his defendant jawing not for hours and hours about a case that has yet to be tried. He wasn't even charged at that point. That's a problem because that means the defense has to keep shifting its strategy. So when Durst is in the beginning saying, oh yeah, whoever wrote that note, must have been involved or must have been the killer. Then when that comes out, Dick DeGuerin, David Chesnoff, and Don Ray have to figure out a way to mitigate that. So, all right, he was there and he panicked. This was the only thing he could think to do to help his friend. He didn't want a body laying there forever.
Wow. Kathie, let's get to another viewer question.
A viewer who happens to be our own Linda Kinney Bodden, who's an anchor at Law&Crime and a famed defense attorney. She wants to know if you heard Durst engaged in the repetitive burping or other physical conduct like we've heard about him, if we've heard about any of that inside the courtroom.
I watch him constantly. I'm fascinated, right? Of course, monitor all the other parts of the trial too, but watching him has become, hobby for me. I haven't seen him flinch. One thing I have seen him do is turn very slowly around with his big black glasses to look at people in the gallery. But I have not seen him burp, cough. He does blurt out words periodically. Kathie, have you noticed that? Every now and then he decides he wants to say something to his attorneys and he just blurts it out right through testimony. Not long sentences, but questions or quick comments. But no burping.
So I want to jump in real quick. I think this was actually a viewer question that I saw, and I wanted to know myself. Is there anybody in the courtroom supporting him, like on his side? Are the victim's family members in there? I mean, who is in the courtroom besides a wealth of reporters?
Well, from my perspective, Jesse, he doesn't have a whole lot of people. Like, there's not a big throng of humanity there cheering on Robert Durst. And in fact, his brother testified, and he testified reluctantly and talked about how much he couldn't stand the guy, how cruel he was. And we know that Douglas Durst, the head of the dynasty, will be testifying, but you don't see throngs of Robert Durst family. Have you, Kathie?
No. There's nobody in his personal life. He has a bunch of legal people, and
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anybody from Kathleen's
Right.
family there either, I don't think.
No.
Well, we'll have to see what
And
happens as the trial
I've
ultimately progresses. And by the way, if you're just joining us, I just want to let everybody know this is Law and Crime Now. We're breaking down the Robert Durst case. We're taking your questions that you might have about the trial, which began last month. It had to be suspended because of COVID-19. It's going to be back on May 26th. That's when they plan to have it back. We're breaking down all aspects of it. And I want to turn to a different aspect of this case because really we could break it down for so many different angles. Morris Black. Now, let's not forget that Robert Durst was tried and acquitted for the murder of his former neighbor, Morris Black, but yet evidence or information from that case keeps coming into this trial. Let's play a moment from this trial when you heard this back and forth about Morris Black. Take a look.
3 days before Morris Black is going to die, and Bob Durst is saying that, one, Morris Black knows who he is, knows he's got a lot of money, knows that he is from New York, and circumstantially the evidence will demonstrate that he knows Bob Durst's situation. And there's another problem that the evidence is going to show, is that Morris Black is pressuring Bob Durst to get a house with him. Mr. Durst, the evidence will show, it's not a secret that he's leaving. So he is about to leave, he's moving out, and Morris Black wants him to get a house. That's going to be the circumstances right before Morris Black is going to be murdered. September 28th, this is going to prove to be the last day of Morris Black's life. Now, Durst's account,
Sorry to interrupt. He said murder. The jury found him innocent.
no, they found him not guilty.
Okay.
Did not find him innocent.
But not much difference.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
But now, there he goes again, Judge.
This is a speaking objection, I don't allow them. So,
What about counsel addressing me?
no, counsel, you should not, Mr. Lewin, and nor should you address Mr. Lewin.
I didn't.
All right, all right. So, Mr. Durst was acquitted of murder in that case. He's no longer in jeopardy in that case. The facts of that case may be relevant in this trial in a different context. They may have a different meaning in the context of other evidence that the parties present. And so you will be allowed to consider that evidence. Mr. Lewin used the term murder, and this is an opening statement. This is not argument. This is not evidence. This is what Mr. Lewin is telling you he intends to prove. If he uses the term murder, that means he intends to prove that that incident was a murder. Whether or not it's a murder or it is not really the point.
Pat, you got to explain this to me. Usually in a courtroom like this, a jury's not supposed to know about this other trial. It's pretty remarkable that they're allowed to know that he was on trial for Morris Black and that he was ultimately acquitted. So what is the game plan here? Why is the Morris Black case really being brought in here? And from what you've seen, I'm shocked that the court allowed this.
Well, it was a severe bone of intention, bone of objection, I should say, from the defense, because they were saying it was similar to double jeopardy. He's already been acquitted. He was found not guilty of murder, even though he admitted to dismembering. But then again, that was because he panicked and didn't know what else to do after he killed Morris Black in self-defense. So they duped it out, prosecution and defense, a lot about that very issue. But the issue for the judge here is that he has to understand that the prosecution is building a scenario that all roads lead to Kathie. He wouldn't have done any of this but for not wanting to be found out about whatever happened to Kathie. So the judge allowed them to bring in aspects of Morris Black because he was starting to learn things about Robert Durst, and Durst was so afraid of what he might do. So they're allowing that. But what's really jolting, I'm sure Kathie agrees with this, is when you talk about dismemberment, I think the toughest part for the defense was trying to convince the jury, okay, yeah, he dismembered it. Yeah, that sounds really terrible. Woo, who can do that? They have to get that jury to separate that dismemberment part
Right.
from being guilty or not guilty in Susan Berman's case. So you're right. I'm sorry that was a long answer, but yeah, the point is the judge had to allow part of it so that the prosecution could lay out their case, that all three went back, everything went back to Kathie.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting when you hear about it. Once a jury hears something, it's kind of hard for them to unhear it or hear about it a certain way. Kathie, let's go to another viewer question. I see them coming in right now for Pat.
Yes, and I will say about the dismemberment part, Pat, the jury saw Morris Black's dismembered body pieces, and there were visible reactions to that. So it's very hard to get past what kind of person could do that. Okay. Who has been the most compelling witness so far, and who's going to be coming up that we're really looking forward to hearing from?
Easy question for me. I thought Thomas Durst was the most compelling so far because he jolted you out of your seat. He sat down. He didn't want to testify, but he did. Talked about how he feared that his brother was going to kill him. Talked about how cruel he was. He even painted a picture of a time where they were all in a revolving door going into a building, and Robert Durst purposely stopped the door while Thomas was trying to get in, and it basically jolted him out onto the street. And he was practically in tears and shaking when he told this story. Now, some people have asked me, was he being overly dramatic? Was he being coached by the prosecution? I don't know. I'm not sure, but there's clearly angst. And I think what's really going to be great is obviously hearing from Robert Durst himself if we do, but Douglas Durst. I really look forward to how he's going to thread that needle when he takes the stand.
Yeah, a lot of people from the Durst family kind of tell more of this story. And speaking of the story, we've talked so much about what the prosecution is trying to show, but what is the defense saying? Jerry, this is what you really should consider and not consider. Well, we heard a part of this in the defense's opening statement. Let's take a look at what they had to say.
In spite of the same dismemberment evidence that you will hear here, found him not guilty. We believe the evidence will show that Morris Black was killed in self-defense, and that is not evidence in connection with Susan Berman's death. It's no evidence. And I'm going to repeat this a lot. No evidence is evidence. If it's not there, you can consider it.
Your Honor, this is complete argument. There hasn't been one indication. It's an argument. It's a closing
I'll
argument.
move on, Your Honor. The evidence will also show that after an exhaustive New York police investigation involving the New York Police Department and the State Police of New York, two of the most respected police agencies in the world, Bob Durst was never charged with any crime with respect to the disappearance of Kathie Durst. Two of the most respected police agencies in the world. The evidence will show that since 1982, 38 years with multiple police agencies involved, he has never been accused by the authorities in New York for her disappearance to this very day. The evidence will show those investigators at one point in time were led by a very hard-charging prosecutor, Jean Pirro. You may know her from Fox News. She's no shrinking violet. Never one time have they ever even brought Bob Durst into custody for purposes of the investigation of Mrs. Durst's disappearance.
Okay, Pat, we're going to get to another viewer question, but before I do, just want to ask you real quick. Kathie, was there really any evidence that Susan was going to go to the police about Kathie? I mean, what information did she supposedly have? I mean, really, I guess the question is, what evidence is there against Durst that he was involved in the disappearance of his wife, Kathie?
Well, okay, so you have to just remember reasonable doubt, and that's what's going to be applied in the Susan Berman case. But what's really important to remember is that Kathie, Chesnoff is right. Nothing has been done until the jinx comes out and gives, suddenly this flood of information about his guilt. And what's really fascinating about his alleged guilt, And what's really fascinating is that this could have changed the entire picture. So Durst gets word that the case is being reopened by Janine Pirro, right? Susan tells Robert that she's been contacted by police, but according to the prosecution, nobody ever contacted her. So what kind of a little trick was that? Why would Susan Berman tell basically her best friend and financial pipeline, oh, the cops want to talk to me, when it wasn't true? Why? That's going to be interesting to lay that out.
Yeah, that's one of the mysteries of this case. Kathie, let's see if we can get one more question in, if we can.
Okay. Our Terry Austin has a question about his health and COVID right now in the jails. Pat, how do you think he's faring? Do we have any information if he's being quarantined inside there?
I have heard, I can't confirm, I have heard that he is not amongst population, may even be receiving medical treatment on the medical side. But listen, the LA County Jail is it's the equivalent of Rikers Island in New York. It's the biggest jail in the country, I believe. It might be second. And that is a concern. And I really thought that they would try to make some sort of appeal to let him have home detention or something, but he's charged with murder. So no, but I do probably think he's being cared for properly, and not amongst the population, but he's not out.
No, he's not. And look, we're expecting this to kind of start up again on May 26th, but really that's a kind of a fluid deadline with everything that's been happening right here. Pat LaLama, Kathie Russon, I thank you so much, both of you, for coming on and breaking down this case. I know there's definitely going to be more discussion as the trial begins again, and who knows what we can expect from now until the trial starts up again. The Robert Durst case never ceases to amaze everybody. Well, everybody out there, we really appreciate you coming on, and we appreciate you following us. It's been a great show. We're going to be back again next week taking your questions here on Law and Crime Now. Please stay safe and have a great week.